Kenneth Petterson from Swedish EPA, been invited by Rice here, Malin, concerning that we are presently working on what we call a concept, very, very loosely, uh, for some reasons where I will go into, where we have this issue of traceability in waste, and what I would say multi-layered challenge in many ways. The headlines here are unfortunately Swedish because it's taken from Swedish so-called magazines from the internet. And the starting point where we come from here is this waste criminality, because waste criminality is a big issue and it's getting bigger by the day. The different highlights here from different medias are very different kinds of, so to speak, scandals where large amounts of unsorted or sorted hazardous waste or waste, whatever, as ending up in nature or ending up in a place where you have to clean up after them. There was one particular instance in a place called Botkyrka, south of Stockholm, which was only one place, but it was cost over 200 millions to sanitize after them. And this is continuous and is even getting to the level of some inspectors actually beginning to feel threatened by some of the actors on this area. And this is where we started to, because we have gotten some assignments from the government to look into this and see how can we get hold of this problem. And that's where we started, but we also have the aspect which should not be forgotten in this particular instance, which is the circularity, because we were receiving regular critique from the European Commission. And when this is taken from the last one, which was given us last year, was just the circular or secondary use of materials is significantly lower than the average use levels. And it was particularly in regards to use of waste incineration. When we have waste incineration as a very practical solution, but it's not exactly circular in that sense. And also we have been given instructions from the government, particularly to our authority, our government, that we need to find a more coordinated digital systems for waste statistics and traceability of waste, and how to improve it for circular economy. So we have also being highlighted that we need to get our gifts together on working on a more traceability in IT systems. And when we started to look into this, we quickly identified that the UK was a couple of years ahead of us. So I'll explain our situation by their situation, because they're ahead of us, but it is very, very similar in the background. And they started in 2018 looking over the views regarding waste, and especially also with a certain focus on waste criminality, which is a major issue for them as well. And they arrived at a conclusion that they needed a digital reporting system, what they called digital waste tracking service. And what they used the word, which I like, recording, which is the central feature in you record of things happening in near real time. And if you look into the background of the description, how they arrived at their conclusion, and the ways that they describe is the way they're using it is very, very difficult to track waste. Mostly paper based. We are perhaps not as paper based as they describe, but basically the IT systems we have are not very different from writing on paper, actually, in many ways. So it makes it very difficult to identify and deal with waste crime, whether it's we apply tipping or you have a waste sites which receive much more than it should have, or it's not supposed to receive waste, whatever. And also we have no comprehensive service. We have a lot of IT systems that are not connected, that they don't talk to each other, all these systems that we have at the moment. And there's a lot of transactions going around. Okay, we don't have 500 million as the UK have, but we have a lot of transactions, a lot of transports, which makes it very, very difficult for inspection authority to get a grip on all of these transports, and also a lot of data to handle. And briefly, also this is also connected to the regulations, because the regulations have changed over time, and you get a new regulation, well, then you build a new IT system. That's basically the way you go forward. And if, for example, you could even read these separate services, household waste. Well, in Sweden, we have something called Avfall Web, which is the corporates reporting household waste. We have commercial waste. We have SMP in Sweden. Hazardous waste, we have Avfallsregistret in Sweden. International waste shipments, we actually don't really have a service for that. It's mail service basically at the moment, almost. And this is very, very similar in many ways that they have, or according as we have as well. And the consequences that they describe is that when the policymakers, they don't have the data to monitor. You do a change in regulations, but what happens in real life? Well, you don't really know because you don't have any connections to what's really happening in the waste. You don't have the up-to-date information. Also, this waste crime, you get lost waste that don't they are picked up. You don't really know where it ends up in nature or somewhere else, and you can't really have. And it's very, very difficult also for the producers of waste because there's a lot of reporting in different systems and so on. So there's a long list of different problems. But what I find is interesting also is that waste criminality is only one of those items, but it actually is the one that decides the solution. They end up with all these problems. Well, we have to record the individual transports because that's the only way to reach this problem of criminality. And that in that way you can solve the other ones as well, because if you have, I mean, if you really look at, we have different IT systems on, well, you can build one central system, you can have a reporting, but it won't solve the waste crimes. But on the hand, if you build up a traceability system where it could be able to trace the individual transports, well, then you can do that for reporting. So that really defines the way you have to achieve address this problem, all these problems that they have. And we have a very similar situation. And so we have developed something of what we call a waste onion, or the wasted onion, to way how, so to speak, to understand the concept of what we are trying to achieve, or where we're standing. And in the core of the onion, that's the waste crime, because that's really forces us to change how we're working, because we can change the rules, we can change the regulations, we can give more money to inspections, or but we still have this egen control system, which is in the middle of the whole, which is really exploited by these actors because they really want to circumvent the rules, which is where we're not prepared for that in our system. So we need to get the detailed overview of each transport and also each facility. How much is that one receiving at the moment, basically, without additional reporting burdens to the answer we already have, because they already had enough reporting burdens as it is. So we really need to switch from this reporting towards recording, more of capturing data in near real time as it happens, more than you report half a year afterwards how much you receive. And that is that we need to focus on the individual trash transport, basically waste transport. But in the next layer, if we achieve this, which we really had to do, and we will get a huge amount of data. We will have data on each and every transport because we need to have that. And that, if we use those data in the right fashion, that will give us the possibility to all these pieces of the base puzzle that we're actually lacking at the moment. And where does the waste end up? How much is incinerated? I mean, really sorted material really could go somewhere else. Well, we incinerated because it was most simple at the moment, perhaps. And how much is landfill actually at the moment? And all this, an overdue, which is an overview of the waste streams. That could also be a possibility to do something about it. And as compared to now, you can do something in regulations and you can actually see what's happening in very, very close to the regulation change. And this is where it comes, you have to trash, but you need to have the overview of where everything goes up. So in that. But we also want to, if possible, and that's one of the challenges here, is that, as we've already been speaking about, the true traceability, because at the moment there's a really big chasm between where things are produced and bought and so on, and then something happens and we end up with waste codes which have nothing to do with the rest of it, and where is the things going and where do they come from and so on. The whole traceability, it's something that we're looking at as well, which would be something to be striving towards. But of course, underlying it all is the business model, which is now very, very linear, as we all know, and to orient ourselves towards the recycling. Because at the moment, waste, I mean, that is a problem. You have a problem that you need to get rid of the waste as soon as simple and preferably as cheap as possible. And the actors who act in this ecosystem, they take over the responsibility. Of course, they do it mostly, except for these actors that we have been speaking of. But otherwise, to a secure and environmentally fashion as possible. But still it is a problem to be solved. You need to get rid of this waste in such a secure environmental friendly as possible. We still need to get rid of it. And we're wondering, is there a way to use this platform or whatever we call it, service that we need to have to address the other problems, to perhaps work towards the other, adjust to their business models. And as we were looking into this, there are like pieces of the puzzle that we've been bumping into. That, I mean, the first one, the tracking service, well, we pretty much have an idea of how to achieve a software-based tracking service. We're looking at UK, France, others be doing something similar. We think we're pretty much into that, but then we were starting to get a bit fuzzy, because personally, blockchain, many is speaking of waste tracking. Oh, blockchain is basically a second thing you say after you say waste tracking service. But so somehow these ones are connected, but I'm not sure how. And then you start looking at, okay, but that's software, but things are happening in real time. There's something going on in nature. Something's moving from one place to another. Materials moving. Do we have transponders, geopositioning fitting in somewhere in this puzzle? The RFID, the QR codes, the marking out physically where the waste is going and moving. Somewhere that could probably fit into this. And then you move up one layer, and then you have another problem if you have your traceability, circularity towards the marks. Well, there's one thing to what we can achieve is that you can have a pretty good check on where this trash is ending up. But something happens here, which makes something goes in and different things go out, and it happens kind of magic things in here. And when I speak to these ones, it's pretty tricky to, I mean, it's very heterogeneous, as we all know. This comes in different things and things happen, and it's very difficult to make, because there's no standards, there's no taxonomy. Here we have the waste codes. Here they have something else. They call it something else. They have their own ways of labeling things. So there's no real standard in that. And something else, but if we want to use this huge amount, well, perhaps big data is something we need to work on. Of course, and artificial intelligence, machine learning should fit into this something. You have a huge amount of data, huge amount of transport, things going in all kinds of directions. They should fit in there somehow to be able to use all this data in a particular way, which we don't really know how, but probably. And this could perhaps be something used by open data. Should all this data to be exposed for someone else to do something smart about it, that should perhaps fit into this. And the final layer, which is the linear Bison's models, is, for example, there's one thing that I noticed is something called excess material exchange, where you have a platform that you connect the excess materials to the ones they can use it the most, instead of suffering from this linear model, which in a way forces you to get rid of a problem as soon as possible. It's more like, how can you connect? Here we have a waste, and actually we could have perhaps always predict that there will be waste occurring here in a couple of weeks or months time, because you're starting to demolish a house. Well, you start to demolish a house, you know that. You can say that in 2 months time, in 3 weeks time, there will be some materials available here. Would that be a possibility in this platform? I don't know, possibly. And then we have looked at different kinds of examples that Holland used very good in that you can actually, if you could use the platform or the service to, really support this upwards movement away hierarchy, what we really need, instead of this, as it is now, end of life scenario, we have something, get rid of it as easy as possible, more or less. And for example, how to facilitate, if it's possible, the waste holder, and I want to have, you have 2 tons of sand, I would use that, or something like that. Could there be possibility to connect them through this kind of platform that we really started with? We have started waste crimes, but what could you use it else for in that kind of terms of traceability? So, thank you.